Hello friends, as part of my video lecture series, today I would like to differentiate murder and culpable homicide. The murder and culpable homicide comes under the offences against the private persons, especially under Chapter 16, which describes the offences affecting human body. In the present video, we are going to discuss the key differences between murder and culpable homicide. Before going to know the exact difference between the murder and culpable homicide, it is better to understand the meaning of the word homicide. Homicide means killing of a human being by a human being. Generally, the killing of a human being by another human being may be lawful or unlawful. If a human being kills another human being by lawful means, or the acts specified under sections 76 to 106 of IPC, then those acts may be treated as lawful homicide. From sections 76 to 106, the general exceptions are enumerated in Indian Penal Code 1860. They are mistake of fact. If a person causes the death of another person by mistake of fact, it is not said to be a murder or culpable homicide. It is a lawful homicide subject to the essential conditions specified under mistake of fact under Indian Penal Code. If a person causes the death of another person because of the judicial acts, it is not said to be an unlawful homicide. It is not punishable. All lawful homicides, here the lawful homicides are specified here, all lawful homicides are not punishable. They are the exceptions for punishment to the offense of homicide. If a person causes the death of another person because of the accident, it is treated as lawful homicide. The acts to avoid greater harm, if a person causes the death of the another person, it becomes a lawful homicide subject to conditions, the essential conditions specified under the concerned section of law. The acts of minor, that is infant, the acts of the infant, doli incapax, the acts of the insane, the acts of the intoxicated or drunkard, the acts which causes the death of another person because of the consent given by the victim, the acts done in good faith, the communications made in good faith, if those causes the death of the another person, then it is not treated as an unlawful homicide. It is lawful homicide. There is no punishment for such acts even though it causes the death of another human being. The acts done under compulsion or threat and the right of private defense, these are the lawful homicides. There is no punishment if a human being causes the killing or death of another human being. These are specified under sections 76 to 106 of Indian Penal Code under the chapter of general exceptions. Now, this is half part related to homicide. Let us see the second half part. This second half part is related to unlawful homicides. The unlawful homicide is killing of a human being by another human being that is liable to be punished as per the provisions of Indian Penal Code. If a human being kills the another human being without any exceptions specified under section 76 to 106 of Indian Penal Code, then such kind of homicide becomes unlawful homicide. There are different unlawful homicides enumerated in Indian Penal Code. Let us see those unlawful homicides. If a human being kills himself, it is known as suicide. It is specified under section 305 and 306 of Indian Penal Code. It is unlawful homicide. But we need to notice one thing, that is, if a person causes death of himself, cannot be punished. Why? Because once he is killed, then how can we punish his dead body? It is impossible to punish the dead body of the person, of the deceased person who had already committed suicide. Attempt to suicide is also punishable. If a person who attempts to kill himself is punished. Suicide is a kind of unlawful homicide. The next one is Dory death. If a person causes the death of a female human being for the demand for the dowry, is an unlawful homicide. It is punishable. The concept of dowry death is explained in Indian Penal Code under section 304B. The third kind of unlawful homicide is causing death by negligence. If a person causes the death of another human being without taking proper care, with his negligent acts, it becomes a punishable act. It becomes an unlawful homicide. It is specified under section 304A of Indian Penal Code. Let us see only this part. Here, the unlawful homicide by intention is of two kinds, namely culpable homicide and murder. Culpable means punishable or liable to be punished, or criminal. Homicide means killing of a human being by another human being. Criminal homicide or punishable form of homicide, which does not come under the general exceptions specified under section 76 to 106 of Indian Penal Code. Murder is also a form of culpable homicide. Let us see the exact difference in between culpable homicide and murder using this summary chart. The homicide may be lawful or unlawful. As per our discussion up to now, homicide means killing of a human being by another human being. Such killing may be lawful or unlawful. A killing of a human being by another human being may be lawful if an act which causes the death of the another human being because of the mistake of fact, judicial acts, accident, acts done to avoid greater harm, acts of the infant, insane, intoxicated or drunkard, acts done with the consent of the victim, acts done in good faith, communication made in good faith that results into the death of the another person, the act done under compulsion or threat that causes the death of the another person, and right of the private defense. All these, or if this is the background for killing of a human being, then such homicide is lawful homicide. A human being may cause the death of another human being by intention or by negligence or for dowry, or he may kills himself. If a human being kills himself, it is known as unlawful homicide. If a human being kills another female human being for extra dowry within a period of 7 years subsequent to their marriage, it becomes Dory Death. If a person rashly, without taking proper care and negligently causes the death of the another human being, it becomes causing death by negligence or unlawful homicide by negligence. If a person with intention causes the death of the another human being, it becomes unlawful homicide by intention. The unlawful homicide by intention may be a culpable homicide or murder. These two concepts, the culpable homicide and murder, are explained under section 299 and section 300 of Indian Penal Code. I want to summarize this chart into certain equations like this. A homicide with general exceptions is lawful homicide. A homicide without general exceptions specified under IPC from sections 76 to 106. Homicide without general exceptions is unlawful homicide. A unlawful homicide of himself or herself is known as suicide. Suicide is a form of unlawful homicide. An unlawful homicide with rash and negligent act is causing death by negligence. An unlawful homicide for the demand for dowry within 7 years of marriage is dowry death. It is also a kind of unlawful homicide. The unlawful homicide with intention to cause death is either a culpable homicide or murder. Murder is a form of culpable homicide. We need to understand the three kinds of culpable homicides, namely mere culpable homicide, culpable homicide amounting to murder, and culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Murder or culpable homicide amounting to murder is the first degree of culpable homicide. Culpable homicide not amounting to murder is the second degree of culpable homicide. The culpable homicide is the third degree of culpable homicide. Let us see the difference. According to section 299, whoever causes the death of a person by the act, here we need to understand the key ingredients of section 299 and 300. We need to correlate the key ingredients of section 299 with 300. Whenever we correlate the key ingredients of these two sections, we can easily differentiate the slight difference. We can easily find the slight, very sharp difference in between the murder and culpable homicide. This is the weakest part in Indian Penal Code, section 299 and 300. These two sections are the weakest. This is this part is the weakest part in Indian Penal Code. But it is not too complex, it is not too hard to understand the difference between these two sections. Let us very lucidly find out the key differences between these two sections. Whoever causes the death of a human being by the acts, by some acts, here the first ingredient is an act, the ultimate result is the death. This is the cause and this is the effect. Actus reus, act is the actus reus, the death is the result. Death is the result, act is the actus reus. Here the word act includes the omissions also. See section 32 of Indian Penal Code, it says the acts include both commissions as well as omissions. Through illustrations we can also differentiate the commissions and omissions under this part. There must be an act of a human being. That act must result in the death of the another human being. These are the first two ingredients for section 299, which means culpable homicide. These are the first two ingredients. Let us see the other important ingredients through which we can easily differentiate culpable homicide or section 299 with murder or section 300 of Indian Penal Code. There must be some act, the act may be commission or omission, that must result in the death of the another human being. Here there is an actus reus, there is a result. Then what about the unlawful intention? The intention. Here let us see the mens rea. There must be an act, there must be some mens rea, there must be some result. An act with mens rea that results in death becomes a homicide. Culpable homicide. Let us see the first mens rea or the first kind of mens rea specified under section 299 or culpable homicide. A person must do an act with the intention to cause death of the another person and the result is the death of the another person. A person must do some acts, the result of the act is the death. At the time of doing the act, the person has intention to cause the death of the another person. It becomes culpable homicide, first kind of culpable homicide as under section 299. The second kind of culpable homicide. A person must do an act, the accused must do an act. This is the actus reus. The result of the act is the death of the another human being. At the time of doing this act, the accused has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death of the another person. Here there is only intention to cause death. Here he has intention to cause bodily injury, that bodily injury may likely to cause the death. Here the death is caused through the bodily injury. Here his intention is not, his final or his ultimate intention is to cause death, but the death should be caused through a bodily injury. This is the second kind of culpable homicide. The third kind is A person must do some act. The act must result in the death of the other human being. At the time of doing such act, the accused has the knowledge to cause the death of the victim. The accused must have the knowledge to cause the death of the victim. This is the third kind of culpable homicide specified under section 299 of IPC. Here, there must be some act. The result is the death. Actus reus, death. If the mens rea is the intention to cause death, it is a first kind of culpable homicide. If the mens rea is the accused has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, it is the second kind of culpable homicide. A person is doing an act that results in the death. At the time of doing such an act, the accused has knowledge to cause death. This is the third kind of culpable homicide. Let us see the three explanations given under section 299 of Indian Penal Code. Explanation 1. After causing the death, the accused person will not allowed to raise the plea that victim died because of the disease from which he was suffering. Victim died because of the disease from which he was suffering, not because of my act. No. The court never accepts this kind of plea. The accused will not be allowed to raise this kind of plea. Here, his intention is to cause a bodily injury. Whenever he causes the bodily injury, that bodily injury likely to cause the death of the person in future. Hence, the accused person will not be allowed to raise the plea that victim died because of the disease from which he was suffering, not because of my act. Because of my act. The second explanation is, after causing the death, the accused person will not be allowed to raise the plea that victim died because of lack of good medical treatment. Whether providing a good medical treatment or not is beyond the control of the person, the accused person. The intention of the accused person is to cause the death or to cause a bodily injury that likely to cause death. If he takes this plea that victim died because of lack of good medical treatment, if he has good medical treatment, he may alive, he can't die. This kind of plea cannot be allowed in the courts of law as under section 299 of Indian Penal Code. The third explanation is, causing death of a child in womb is not culpable homicide. Causing a child in womb is not culpable homicide, but when any part of the body of the baby comes out of the mother, then causing the death of such infant amounts to culpable homicide. Here, the child in womb, causing the death of child in womb does not amount to culpable homicide. Whenever even a small part of the body comes out from the womb of the mother, subsequently the accused causes the death of such neonatal baby, that also amounts to culpable homicide. If the baby is completely in the womb of the mother, if the accused causes the death of a child in the womb, that not amount to culpable homicide. We need to understand these three explanations under section 299. From this, it is very clear that in order to constitute culpable homicide, there must be some act. The result of the act is the death. The act must be done by the accused with an intention to cause death, or with an intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, or with with knowledge to cause death. Next, Section 300 of Indian Penal Code explains 4 circumstances where culpable homicide amounts to murder. This is culpable homicide. Now let us see what the murder is. Murder. There are 4 circumstances. Under these 4 circumstances, a culpable homicide amounts to murder. Let us see the first circumstance. The first circumstance is an empty one. I have kept an empty box here. The logic behind drawing this empty box is intention to cause death is the mens rea under culpable homicide. The same mens rea is also mentioned in section 300 of Indian Penal Code. Let us see what the murder is as under section 300 of Indian Penal Code, and how it is different from culpable homicide or section 299 of Indian Penal Code. As we know, there must be some act. Here the act includes both the commission or omission. The result of the act is the death. The result is the death. Let us see the mens rea part of section 300. Earlier we discussed that murder is a form of culpable homicide. Murder is one of the forms of culpable homicide. As under section 3, according to section 300, whoever causes the death of the another human being by the act with intention to cause death amounts to murder. There must be some act. The result of the act is the death. The mens rea is intention to cause death. The same thing. The first essential element in culpable homicide is intention to cause death. This is the first essential element in culpable homicide. The same amounts to murder. Hence, I kept an empty box. There must be some act done by a person, done by the accused. Such act must result in the death of the other human being. At the time of doing such act, the accused has intention to cause the death of the another human being. It amounts to murder. Simply, on the basis of these two, on the basis of this structure, we can easily understand that the first essential ingredient is itself the first essential ingredient in murder. Let us see the second circumstance and third circumstance. There must be some act. The act must result in the death of the another human being with the intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death, and the offender has knowledge to cause death, is amounts to murder. A person must do an act that must result in the death of the another human being. At the time of doing such act, the accused person has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death. That is that act is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death is amounts to murder. This is the first form of murder. This is the second form of murder. This is the third form of murder, or the third circumstance where a culpable homicide is amounts to murder. Here an act must be done by the accused. The result of the act is the death. At the time of doing such act, the accused has intention to cause bodily injury. That bodily injury likely to cause the death. The ultimate intention of the accused is to cause the death of the victim. And also the accused has the knowledge to cause the death. He has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, and he has also has the knowledge to cause the death of the another human being. Here there are two mens reas. There are two ill intentions in the mind of the accused under murder, the second form of murder. Here there is only one. In first circumstance where culpable homicide is amounts to murder, or the first form of murder, only one, there is only one mens rea, or only one ill intention. In second form, there are two ill intentions, or there are two mens rea in the mind of the accused. They are, at the time of doing an act that results in death, the accused has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, and the accused has knowledge to cause the death. There are two mens rea. He has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, and he has the knowledge to cause the death. The third form of the murder is the accused must do an act that must be result in the death of the another human being. Coming to the mens rea part of the third kind of murder, the accused has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death. The act is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death of the another person. Here there are two mens rea. In third form of murder, there are intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, and the second one is that act is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death. Through the illustrations we can easily understand the key differences between murder and culpable homicide. Let us see the fourth form. A person, the fourth form of murder. The accused must do an act that must result in the death of the another human being. At the time of the doing such act, the accused has the knowledge to cause the death of the another person, and the act must be imminently dangerous act without any excuse for incurring the risk of causing death or bodily injury that likely to cause death. Eminently dangerous act, he must know that it must be an eminently dangerous act, and the accused has knowledge to cause the death of the other human being. Here there are two mens rea under the fourth form of murder, or the fourth circumstance where a culpable homicide amounts to murder. Here, act, the result is the death. Intention to cause death is the first kind of murder, or first circumstances where culpable homicide amounts to murder. The second one is act, the result is the death, and with the intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, with the knowledge to cause the death is the second form. The third form is there must be an act that must result in the death of the another human being, and the accused has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, and the act is sufficient to sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death. This is the third form. There must be some act done by the accused that results in the death of the another human being, and the act must be done with the knowledge to cause the death. And the act, that imminently dangerous act, that is the fourth form of murder, or the fourth circumstance where culpable homicide amounts to murder. This is section 300. Let us see the second part of section 300. Here, there are 3 degrees of culpable homicide. There are culpable homicide amounting to murder, culpable homicide not amounting to murder, and the mere culpable homicide or simple culpable homicide. Up to now, we have discussed what the murder is and what the culpable homicide is. Let us see what the culpable homicide not amounting to murder is. There are 5 exceptions specified under section 300 of Indian Penal Code. The first exception that differentiates a culpable homicide amounting to murder with a culpable homicide not amounting to murder. If the accused causes the death of the another person even with intention to cause bodily injury, with the knowledge to cause the death, offender has the knowledge that act is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death, that act is eminently dangerous act, but such act is done by the accused under grave and sudden provocation, then it is not a murder, it is a culpable homicide not amounting to murder. This is the first kind of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Here, the provocation, the nature of the provocation in murder is to be understood very carefully. The provocation shall sought or voluntarily provoked by the offender, then he can't avail this exception. If he causes the death of the another person with intention or with intention to cause bodily injury or with the knowledge to cause the death, even with any of these second mens rea, but such grave and sudden provocation was voluntarily provoked by the offender himself, by the accused, then it is not a culpable homicide amounting to murder, but it is a murder. There are three exceptions for the first exception specified under second part of section 300 or the exceptions specified under section 300. There are 3 exceptions for the first exception specified under section 300 of Indian Penal Code. Thus, grave and sudden provocation shall not voluntarily provoked by the offender. If the grave and sudden provocation was not voluntarily provoked by the offender, then it becomes culpable homicide amounting to murder. The grave and sudden provocation shall not done in obedience to law or by public servant not in lawful exercise of his powers. If such grave and sudden provocation shall not done in obedience to the law, then it becomes a murder. If such grave and sudden provocation shall done in obedience to the law, it becomes culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The grave and sudden provocation shall be by the public servant in the lawful exercise of his powers. And lawful exercise of his powers, it becomes culpable homicide not amounting to the murder. If the grave and sudden provocation shall not done in the lawful exercise of the right of the private defense, it becomes murder. If such grave and sudden provocation has done in the lawful exercise of the right of the private defense, it becomes the culpable homicide not amounting to murder. These are the three exceptions for exception 1 specified under section 300. If all these ingredients are present but it falls under the first exception specified under section 300, then it becomes culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Let us see the second exception, that is exceeding the right of private defense. There must be some act that must result in the death of the another human being. At the time of doing such act, the accused has the mens rea or the double mens rea. But he causes the death due to exceeding the right of private defense. He exceeded the right of private defense. Just go through the concept of right of private defense from sections 96 to 106 of Indian Penal Code, which describe the concept of right of private defense. When the right of private defense may be extended up to death, when the right of private defense may not be extended up to death or specified under those sections, just go through those sections to understand the concept of right of private defense. If the accused exceeds the right of his private defense and causes the death of the another person, he has the intention to cause the death or intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death of the other person, or he has the knowledge to cause the death of the another person, or he may has any of these additional mens rea, but he exceeded the right of private defense. If he exceeds the right of private defense, at right of private defense, there are some chances for protecting himself, but he exceeds his right of private defense, hence it does not amount to murder, but it is a culpable homicide not amounting to murder. This is the second degree of culpable homicide. The third exception specified under section 300 is public servant exceeding his powers. If a public servant through his act causes the death of the another person with intention to cause death or with the intention to cause bodily injury, with the knowledge to cause the injury, and the offender has knowledge to cause the death, or such act is sufficient in ordinary course of the death, or that imminently dangerous act, but that act is done by the public servant exceeding his powers, amounts to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The fourth exception is sudden fight. Sudden fight. If a person causes the death by some act, at the time of the doing such act, he has intention to cause the death, or he has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death, or he has knowledge to cause the death, or the accused person has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause death, and the offender also has the knowledge, and the act is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death, and he has knowledge and to cause the death, and he did an eminently dangerous act that amounts to death of the other person, but these acts are done with any of these mens rea under a sudden fight. It falls under the fourth exception of section 300. It amounts to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The fifth exception is with consent or consent. A person causes the death of the another person through some act. He has mens rea, or he may also have the double mens rea, but he did that act with the consent of the victim. The age of the victim must be 18 or more than 18 years. If the victim takes the risk of the death, his own death, he must do the risk of his own death. That does not amount to culpable homicide that does not amount to murder, but it is a culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The victim has given the consent. But the accused has intention, he has mens rea to cause the death of the person. It also amounts to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. From this chart, we can easily understand that there are three kinds of culpable homicides. There are 4 kinds of murders, and there are 5 kinds of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Here, the punishments for various offences. Punishment for various offences are specified in different sections of Indian Penal Code. The punishment for culpable homicide is not at all, the punishment for simple culpable homicide is not at all very expressly stated in the Indian Penal Code, but the punishment for culpable homicide not amounting to murder may be presumed as the punishment for culpable homicide. Here, the punishment for murder is death or life imprisonment and fine. Coming to the nature of the section, murder is a cognizable offence, it is non-bailable offence, it is triable by Court of Sessions, and it is non-compoundable in nature. Coming to culpable homicide, here this punishment is specified under paragraph 2 of section 304 if there is the third kind of mens rea under section 299. If the accused causes the death of the another person by an act with the knowledge to cause the death, under those circumstances, the punishment for culpable homicide is according to section 304 para 2, 10 years imprisonment or fine or both. It is cognizable in nature, non-bailable, triable by Court of Sessions, and it is non-compoundable in nature. If the ingredients are these two in culpable homicide, intention to the accused did an act that results in the death of the another person, at the time of doing the act he has intention to cause the death of the another person, or if he has intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death, then the punishment is specified under section 304 para 1. The punishment is as life imprisonment or 10 years imprisonment and fine. It is cognizable in nature, non-bailable, triable by court of sessions and non-compoundable. Next, through this theoretical understanding, we have some idea regarding what the mere culpable homicide is, what the murder is, what the culpable homicide not amounting to murder is. Let us very clearly, very crystal clearly differentiate murder and culpable homicide using certain illustrations. The apex court held in many cases that all murders are culpable homicides, but all culpable homicides are not murders. All murders are culpable homicides. On the basis of this sentence, we can easily say that murder is a form of culpable homicide. Hence, all culpable homicides are not murders. The degree of probability of death determines the criminal liability for either culpable homicide or murder. If there is more degree of probability of death, then the criminal liability is for murder. If the degree of probability of death is very low, then the criminal liability is for culpable homicide. Let us see the difference between murder and culpable homicide using certain illustrations. Through these illustrations, we can very crystal clearly find the difference between murder and culpable homicide. In murder, there are double mens rea. In culpable homicide, there is a single mens rea. Or in certain cases, the culpable homicide not amounting to murder, even though there are two mens rea or there is double mens rea, there are some exceptions. Under murder, there are no such exceptions. Let us see the first illustration. Here, the condition is A wants to kill B. In all these situations, the result is the death of the B. First, we need to stick on this sentence. In condition 1 or situation 1, A went market and he got a small knife. Then A went to B and stabbed him with the help of that small knife. As we know, the result is the death of Mr. B. Then come to the second, this part. A went to market. A went to market. He purchased a big sharp knife. A big sharp knife. A went to B and stabbed him with the help of that big sharp knife. In both the cases, A wants to kill B and the ultimate result is the death of Mr. B. In situation A purchases a small knife. In situation B, A purchased a big sharp knife. In situation A, there is a probability of death of Mr. B. In this situation or in the second situation, there is more probability of death of Mr. B when he is stabbed with a big knife, big sharp knife. Hence, it is the culpable homicide, and this one is the murder. But there are certain other features, there are certain other factors determine whether such act is culpable homicide or murder. If all are similar, if all other factors are similar, if we are in that presumption, then we can compare these two situations. Based on these two situations, we can say this one as the first condition as culpable homicide, and the second condition maybe as the murder. Coming to the second illustration, A took B to the 4th floor of a building and thrown him from the 4th floor. The condition is, the pre-existing condition is, A wants to kill B. In all these situations, the result is the death of the B. A took Mr. B to the 4th floor of the building and thrown him from the 4th floor. That results in the death of Mr. B. A did an act of throwing Mr. B from the 4th floor. The result is the death of Mr. B. A has the intention to cause the death of Mr. B, or A has the intention to cause bodily injury that likely to cause the death of Mr. B, or A has the knowledge to cause the injury. A has the knowledge to cause the death of Mr. B. In the second case, A took Mr. B to 24th floor of a building and thrown him from the 24th floor. Whenever a person is thrown from the 4th floor, under ordinary course of action, or simply under ordinary sense, there is a likelihood of causing death. If a person is thrown from the 24th floor, there is a certainty of the death of the person. In first condition, there are some chances, there is a probability of death, or there is a likelihood of the death. Coming to the second situation, whenever a person is thrown from the 24th floor of the building, then there is more certainty for the death of Mr. B. Then there is more probability of causing death of Mr. B. This slight difference differentiates the concept of culpable homicide from murder. This is culpable homicide and this is murder if we are in presumption that all other conditions are similar. Next, coming to third illustration. A went to market and purchased 5 grams of poison. He mixed 5 grams of poison to milk and served the same to Mr. B. That results in the death of Mr. B. A wants to kill Mr. B. He went to market and purchased 5 grams of poison, and he mixed 5 grams of poison to the milk and served the same to Mr. B. That results in the death of Mr. B. In the second condition or second circumstance, A wants to kill Mr. B. He went to the market and bought 50 grams of poison. He mixed 50 grams of poison to milk and served the same to Mr. B. That result in the death of Mr. B. In both the cases, the result is the death. In both the cases, A wants to kill Mr. B. In both the cases, A mixed the poison to the milk, and he served such poison mixed milk to Mr. B, then what differentiate whether he committed culpable homicide or murder? Here, the amount of poison mixed to the milk differentiate whether this offence is culpable homicide or murder. After the death of Mr. B, after medical examination and the post-mortem report, if the expert states that 5 grams of poison is likely to cause death, then it becomes culpable homicide. If he state in his post-mortem report, if the medical expert says that 50 grams of poison is sufficient to cause the death of the person, is sufficient to cause the death of the person in ordinary course of nature, then it becomes murder. It is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death. 50 grams is sufficient. But 5 grams may likely to cause the death. There is a likelihood of death with 5 grams of poison. There is a certainty of death, or 50 grams is sufficient. It is sufficient in ordinary course of nature to cause the death of Mr. B. It differentiates whether this act is a culpable homicide or murder. Next, up to now, we have seen the concept of commission, not the omission, as specified under section 32 of Indian Penal Code. According to section 32 of Indian Penal Code, all acts include both the commissions as well as omissions. Let us see how the omission becomes either a culpable homicide or murder. A wants to kill Mr. B. With that intention, A keeps Mr. B without food for 10 days. A keeps or A confines Mr. B without food for 10 days. That result in the death of Mr. B. In second condition, A confined Mr. B and he keeps Mr. B without providing food for 100 days. In both the cases, A wants to kill Mr. B. In both the cases, A confined Mr. B. In both the cases, A does not provide food to Mr. B. But the key difference, the point which distinguishes, the boundary which distinguishes, which separates or differentiates the culpable homicide and murder is the number of days. He keeps Mr. B without food. In first condition, A keeps Mr. B without food for 10 days. There is a probability of causing death. There is a probability of causing death. In second condition, A keeps Mr. B without food for 100 days. There is more probability of death of Mr. B. Why? Because A keeps B without food for 100 days. There is a certainty of death. If a person doesn't provide food to another person for a period of 100 days, then there is a certainty of death of the another person. The another person certainly dies with starvation. At this point, the number of days Mr. A keeps Mr. B without providing food differentiate whether this acts amounts to culpable homicide, whether it is a culpable homicide or murder. Next, the another illustration is A shouted, "Where are you, Mr. B? I want to kill you." But B was in a room. A didn't know or he didn't notice the position of Mr. B within the room, whether B was standing or sitting or sleeping behind the door or inside of the room. Then A fired Mr. B with a revolver. A wants to kill Mr. B. The result is the death of Mr. B. He fired Mr. B with a revolver, but B is inside of a room. A don't know the position of Mr. B, but the ultimate result is the death of Mr. B. Let us see the second circumstance. A shouted, "Where are you, Mr. B? I want to kill you." But B was in a room. Whenever A shouted, Mr. B came out of the room. Immediately, Mr. A fired towards the direction of B with a revolver. That results in the death of Mr. B. A wants to kill Mr. B. The result is the death of Mr. B. In first condition, A wants to kill Mr. B. In second condition also, Mr. A wants to kill Mr. B. In first condition, the ultimate result is the death of Mr. B. In second condition also, the result is the death of Mr. B. In first condition, B is inside of the room or behind the doors. In the second condition, whenever Mr. B comes out of the room, immediately A fired towards the direction of Mr. B. In first condition, A didn't know the exact position of Mr. B. He blindly fired through the door. In second condition, Mr. A know the current position of Mr. B. He rushed out from the room in a standing position, in a walking position. He fired towards the direction of Mr. B. He fired at the head of Mr. B. He know the exact position. This point differentiate the act as murder, not as culpable homicide under this condition. There is more probability to cause death under this condition. There is a probability of death. There is a likelihood of death. There is certainty of death. Next, the next illustration is A wants to kill Mr. B. The ultimate result is the death of Mr. B. A gave 5 blows with a stick that results in the death of Mr. B. In second situation, A gave 5,000 blows to B with a stick that also results in the death of Mr. B. In first condition or in first situation, A wants to kill Mr. B. In the second situation, also A wants to kill Mr. B. The result in first situation is death of Mr. B. The result of the second situation is the death of Mr. B. The difference is 5 blows, 5,000 blows, or n number of blows. Whenever a person gives 5 blows with a stick, there is a probability of death, or there is a likelihood of death. The death is not certain. The death is not more probable. Whenever a person gives 5,000 blows with a stick, there is more probability of causing death. There is more certainty for death. These points, through this, we can easily differentiate the concept of culpable homicide and murder. Let us see the theoretical differences between these two concepts. As we know, all murders are culpable homicides, but all culpable homicides are not murders. The degree of probability of death, it is the most important point. The degree of probability of death determines the criminal liability for culpable homicide and murder. The culpable homicide is defined under section 299. The concept of murder is defined under section 300 of Indian Penal Code. The culpable homicide is a genus, murder is a species, murder is a form. It is a part and parcel of culpable homicide. It is a part or it is a form of culpable homicide. There is some intention, but it is not so much stronger as is evident in murder. There is some intention in culpable homicide, but that intention is not so much stronger, is evident in murder. But in murder, there is a strong intention to cause death. Generally, there shall be a plan to kill a human being. There is a plan. The culpable homicide is less serious when compared to murder. Murder is more serious than culpable homicide. It is an aggravated form of culpable homicide. It is an aggravated form. Every culpable homicide is not a murder, but every murder is a culpable homicide. When there is probability of death, then it is culpable homicide. When there is more probability of death, it is murder, more probability for death. When there is likelihood of death, it is culpable homicide. When there is certainty of death, it is murder. Death is certain. The death may likely to cause death. Likely to cause death. Culpable homicide. Certain to cause death. There is a certainty of cause. There is a certainty of death. It is murder. There is a single mens rea in culpable homicide as under section 299. There is double mens rea plus any one of 5 exceptions specified under section 300 for culpable homicide not amounting to murder. There is always double mens rea without any one of the exceptions specified under section 300 for murder. The double mens rea without exceptions. There is a single mens rea or double mens rea with any one of the exceptions for culpable homicide. The punishment is lesser than murder. The punishment is heavier than culpable homicide. Section 304 para 1 describes punishment for culpable homicide as life imprisonment or 10 years imprisonment and fine. Under section 304 para 2, the punishment for culpable homicide is 10 years imprisonment or fine or both. But whereas the punishment for murder is death penalty or life imprisonment and fine.